Kings are a very strange idea when you think about them for more than 5 seconds. At some point, human beings looked at another human being and decided, yes, that guy gets the palace, the army, the taxes, the fancy chair, and possibly a direct line to heaven. And then somehow everyone else was expected to act normal about it. What makes this even stranger is that for most of our species' existence, humans did not live under kings at all. We lived in small communities where an overly ambitious leader could be mocked, ignored, abandoned, or occasionally reminded that everyone else also owned a spear. So how did we get from, "Don't boss me around" to "Your Majesty"? There was no single prehistoric genius who invented monarchy. No caveman filed a patent for crowns. Instead, kings emerged when several older human inventions collided: stored wealth, permanent settlements, warfare, religion, inheritance, and the growing problem of organizing thousands of strangers. The crown came later. The real invention was obedience. Before humans could invent kings, they first had to invent a world where kings could survive. That sounds obvious, but for most of human history, it was a serious problem. Small hunter-gatherer groups were often terrible environments for aspiring dictators. If one person became too arrogant, demanded too much food, or started acting like everyone else existed to applaud him, the group had options. They could laugh at him, ignore him, refuse to cooperate, leave. Mobility was political power. If your entire community could pack its belongings and move 20 miles away, ruling people permanently became extremely difficult. You cannot collect taxes from citizens who have disappeared into the forest. Anthropologists have documented what are sometimes called leveling mechanisms in many relatively egalitarian societies: ridicule, gossip, food-sharing expectations, collective decision-making, and alliances against people who become too domineering. A skilled hunter might earn prestige, but prestige was not necessarily command. Killing the largest animal did not automatically unlock the supreme leader achievement. This does not mean prehistoric humans lived in some peaceful democratic paradise. Absolutely not. Humans can form hierarchies very easily. Age matters, gender can matter. Fighting ability, ritual knowledge, family connections, generosity, personality, and access to valuable resources can all create differences in influence. And archaeology increasingly suggests that prehistoric societies experimented with many political arrangements, including some surprisingly unequal ones. But there is an important difference between having influential people and having a king. A king requires durable power. Not just people listen to Kevin because Kevin knows where the mammoths are. More like Kevin controls land, resources, armed followers, religious ceremonies, and somehow Kevin's son inherits all of this, despite being 12 and deeply annoying. That kind of authority needs infrastructure. For a ruling position to become permanent, people usually need reasons to stay in one place, valuable resources that can be controlled, enough surplus to support specialists and elites, and social systems capable of transferring status across generations. And this is where the human story starts changing. Long before the first historically documented kings appeared, some communities became increasingly sedentary. People returned to the same rich fishing grounds, harvested wild cereals, built more permanent structures, stored food, and eventually domesticated plants and animals. Suddenly, wealth could accumulate. And wealth that accumulates can be guarded. A hunter's reputation disappears when he dies. A storage building full of grain does not. Neither does a field. Neither does a herd. Neither does a house sitting on valuable land. Once people began investing heavily in places and possessions that could not simply be carried away, leaving an abusive neighbor became more expensive. Expensive. You could still walk away, but now your barley was here, your livestock was here, your dead grandparents were buried here, and perhaps most importantly, your future was here. Human beings had spent hundreds of thousands of years learning how to manage ambitious individuals. Then we built villages, and ambition finally got an address. Farming did not immediately create kings. It created something much more dangerous: a spreadsheet. Not literally at first, obviously. But once people began producing grain, raising livestock, storing harvests, and living in permanent settlements, human wealth became easier to measure, divide, inherit, and steal. That changed everything. Imagine two families living in the same early village. One has a slightly better field. Maybe their soil holds water longer. Maybe they have more relatives available during harvest. Maybe they simply get lucky for 3 seasons in a row. Their granary fills. Then another family has a bad year. Now the successful household can lend them grain, exchange food for labor, acquire livestock, arrange advantageous marriages, or build obligations that last much longer than the original emergency. Nobody has invented feudalism yet, but the ingredients are starting to smell suspicious. Archaeologists can sometimes see inequality developing through differences in house size, storage capacity, grave goods, access to imported materials, and eventually monumental architecture. Not every farming society followed the same path, and some remained remarkably resistant to permanent hierarchy. But agriculture created opportunities that mobile societies had rarely possessed on the same scale. Surplus could be concentrated, and concentrated surplus could support people who did not spend all day producing food. Craft specialists appeared. Traders traveled farther. Ritual experts gained influence. Administrators counted things. Warriors could potentially be fed while doing something other than farming. This was an enormous social upgrade. It was also the beginning of management meetings. As settlements grew, coordination became harder. Irrigation systems needed maintenance. Fields required boundaries. Stored food needed protection. Trade had to be organized. Disputes needed settlement. Large construction projects required labor. Even if nobody wanted a king, somebody increasingly had to make decisions. At first, authority may have been temporary, divided, seasonal, ritual, communal, or attached to respected households. A person who organized a feast might gain prestige. A lineage controlling a shrine might gain religious influence. Someone skilled in warfare might become important during conflict. The crucial change was that these advantages could begin reinforcing one another. Food supported followers. Followers protected food. Prestige attracted alliances. Alliances produced marriages. Marriages produced heirs. Heirs inherited property, relationships, and increasingly status. Power was becoming sticky. And once a community contained thousands of people instead of a few dozen, social control also became less personal. You could no longer solve every disagreement by gathering everyone around the fire and asking why Brian had stolen someone's goat again. Institutions became useful. So did specialists. So did leaders. And then came another pressure that could turn respected leadership into something far more permanent. Violence. Permanent settlements were valuable targets. Grain stores could be raided. Herds could be stolen. Fertile land could be contested. Trade routes could be attacked. In a crisis, people often tolerate stronger leadership because coordination matters more when someone outside the walls is trying to kill you. A successful war leader could gain followers, captured wealth, prestige, and control over redistribution. Win enough wars and temporary authority starts developing excellent job security. The first kings probably did not appear because everyone suddenly fell in love with monarchy. They appeared in worlds where wealth could accumulate. Populations could not easily scatter. Institutions were growing, and organized violence rewarded people who could command others. Humanity had created surplus. Now, someone just had to decide who controlled it. By around 3200 BCE, something extraordinary was happening in southern Mesopotamia. Uruk had become enormous. Not enormous by modern standards. Nobody was complaining about rush hour traffic or paying $18 for coffee. But compared with the villages humans had lived in for thousands of years, Uruk was a completely different social organism. It had monumental buildings, specialized workers, long-distance trade, religious institutions, administrators, and enough strangers living together that simply remembering who owed whom 3 baskets of barley was no longer a reliable accounting system. So humans began writing things down. Some of the earliest tablets from Uruk are not heroic poems about glorious kings. They are paperwork, grain, animals, labor, rations, officials. Civilization had invented bureaucracy before it perfected literature. One early administrative text from Uruk lists roughly 120 officials, including people associated with law, agriculture, livestock, crafts, and religious roles. Whatever political system existed there, this was no longer a village elder occasionally settling an argument between cousins. Authority was becoming organized. And importantly, archaeologists have to be careful here. The existence of administrators, temples, monumental buildings, or powerful individuals does not automatically prove that Uruk already had kings in the later, fully developed sense. The earliest political vocabulary of Mesopotamia is complicated, and titles that later became associated with rulers may have changed meaning over time. But a few centuries later, the evidence becomes much harder to miss. By the early dynastic period, Mesopotamian cities such as Ur, Kish, Lagash, and Uruk were competing political centers. Written inscriptions identify rulers. Warfare appears repeatedly in texts and art. Elite burials display staggering differences in wealth. And then there is the royal cemetery at Ur. Dating largely to the mid-3rd millennium BCE, the cemetery contained exceptionally rich graves packed with gold, silver, lapis lazuli, musical instruments, weapons, vessels, and other luxury objects brought from enormous distances. Some burials also included multiple human attendants. Whatever exactly happened during those funerals remains debated, but the message of the tombs is difficult to misunderstand. These were not ordinary people. One famous object from Ur, usually called the Standard of Ur, shows rows of soldiers, captives, workers, animals, and a central figure rendered noticeably larger than everyone around him. Ancient artists were not struggling with perspective. Size was politics. The important person literally took up more space. By this point, leadership had become visible in architecture, administration, warfare, luxury goods, burial practices, and written titles. Power was no longer merely something a persuasive individual exercised face-to-face. It had acquired offices, symbols, records, ceremonies, and eventually dynasties. This is the archaeological turning point that makes kingship recognizable. A king was becoming more than the toughest man in town. He stood at the center of institutions capable of collecting resources, commanding labor, organizing violence, communicating with gods, and passing authority into the future. Which raises an uncomfortable question. Why would thousands of people accept this? Did kings protect society? Did they seize control of it? Or did they convince everyone that the universe itself wanted them in charge? Archaeology can show us the throne. Explaining why people agreed to kneel is much harder. This is where the story gets messy. Because archaeology is very good at showing us that kings existed, it is much worse at telling us exactly why people accepted them. There is no surviving memo from 3000 BCE titled, "Reasons we have decided Kevin is now sacred." So scholars have built models, several of them. One possibility is warfare. If settlements were competing over land, water, trade routes, livestock, or stored food, then communities with coordinated military leadership may have had an advantage. A successful commander could attract followers, distribute captured wealth, and turn temporary wartime authority into something more permanent. That makes intuitive sense. It is also dangerously neat. War can create strong leaders, but it does not automatically create hereditary kings. Plenty of societies have fought wars without turning generals into dynasties. Another hypothesis focuses on economic control. If powerful households, temples, or institutions controlled grain stores, irrigation systems, trade networks, or access to valuable land, then managing resources could gradually become managing people. Control the surplus and suddenly your opinions become extremely interesting. But again, this does not mean early rulers personally owned everything, or sat inside a giant warehouse whispering, "Excellent." Mesopotamian economies were complex. Temples, households, administrators, laborers, merchants, and elite families all interacted in systems that changed across regions and centuries. Then there is religion. This one matters enormously because early political authority was often entangled with the sacred. If leaders could claim special relationships with gods, oversee temples, sponsor rituals, interpret divine favor, or present military victories as proof that the gods approved of them, political power gained something violence alone could never provide: legitimacy. A soldier can force you to obey while he is standing nearby. A god can supervise your behavior when nobody is around. Convenient. Some scholars have also emphasized large-scale coordination. Growing settlements needed mechanisms for organizing labor, resolving disputes, maintaining infrastructure, and distributing resources. Strong institutions may have offered real benefits, meaning hierarchy was not necessarily imposed entirely from above. People may sometimes have accepted greater inequality because centralized leadership solved expensive collective problems. That possibility makes kingship more interesting and more uncomfortable, because perhaps the earliest states were neither simple protection rackets nor peaceful community projects. They could be both. A ruler might organize irrigation and collect tribute, protect trade and demand labor, defend the city and build a monument celebrating himself defending the city. Human institutions are talented like that. The bigger problem is that there may never have been one universal road to monarchy. Egypt developed kingship differently from Mesopotamia. Other complex societies created powerful hereditary rulers under different ecological, religious, and political conditions. Some societies built cities without obvious kings. Others developed sharp inequality before anything resembling a state appeared. History refuses to give us a clean origin story. So, asking who invented kings may actually be the wrong question. Kingship was probably not invented like pottery or the wheel. It emerged when several forms of power began locking together. Economic power, military power, ritual power, administrative power, family inheritance. Each one could exist without a king. But when one person, one household, or one office managed to combine enough of them, something new became possible. A leader no longer needed to prove himself every morning. His position could become normal, then traditional, then sacred, then hereditary. And once people stopped asking why one family ruled and started explaining why that family had always been meant to rule, kingship crossed a threshold. Power had become a story, and the most successful kings were about to make that story cosmic. Once kingship existed, rulers faced a problem more difficult than conquering a city. They had to make domination feel natural. You can win a battle with spears. You cannot run a dynasty on spears alone. Eventually, people start asking irritating questions like, why does his family get everything? And why am I carrying stones for his temple? So kings learned to wrap political power in something much stronger than force: meaning. In Mesopotamia, kings increasingly presented themselves as chosen by the gods, protected by the gods, or ruling as part of a divine cosmic order. The famous Sumerian king list opens with a wonderfully efficient political claim. Kingship descended from heaven. That is excellent branding. Not, our family seized control during a complicated regional conflict. Heaven did it. Please direct complaints upward. This did not mean every Mesopotamian king claimed to be a god. Most did not. More commonly, rulers portrayed themselves as divinely favored shepherds, responsible for justice, temples, warfare, prosperity, and maintaining the proper relationship between humans and the supernatural world. That shepherd metaphor appears again and again, which sounds gentle until you remember what shepherds actually do. They decide where everyone goes. Religion also gave kingship a calendar. Festivals, temple ceremonies, offerings, processions, coronations, and public rituals transformed authority into something people repeatedly experienced. A ruler was no longer just the person who commanded soldiers. He appears at the center of the universe's maintenance schedule. If the harvest succeeded, divine order was working. If enemies were defeated, the gods had shown favor. If a giant temple rose above the city, It demonstrated both devotion and an impressive ability to persuade thousands of people to move bricks. Monuments mattered because political power becomes more convincing when it is made physical. Palaces, temples, statues, inscriptions, city walls, victory monuments, and royal tombs turned abstract hierarchy into landscapes. You could walk through power. You could look up at it. You could be buried underneath it. Dynasties made the system even more durable. A powerful leader eventually dies, which is inconvenient for any political ideology built around one exceptional individual. Inheritance solves that problem. If authority belongs not merely to a person, but to a bloodline, then succession becomes easier to explain. The dead ruler's son is not starting from zero. He inherits ancestors, alliances, property, titles, rituals, and a story that tells everyone why his family belongs at the top. Royal genealogies could stretch that story backward until rulers were connected to legendary heroes or divine ancestors. And sometimes rulers pushed the idea even further. The Akkadian king Naram-Sin, who ruled in the 23rd century BCE, famously took on divine status during his reign. In inscriptions, his name could be marked with the sign associated with divinity, and artistic representations placed him above everyone else in a visual hierarchy that was not subtle. On the victory stele of Naram-Sin, he climbs a mountain above defeated enemies wearing a horned helmet associated with divinity. He is taller than everyone, higher than everyone, closer to the heavens. Ancient propaganda understood camera angles before cameras existed. But the real achievement of kingship was not convincing people that one ruler was special. It was convincing them that the office itself was necessary. Kings administered justice, sponsored temples, organized armies, redistributed wealth, negotiated with other states, commissioned construction, and represented the community before gods and enemies. The institution became woven into everyday life. Taxes led to administrators. Administrators produced records. Records supported institutions. Institutions supported armies. Armies protected rulers. Rulers funded temples. Temples legitimized rulers. Congratulations, you have invented a feedback loop wearing jewelry. And because kingship now lived in rituals, buildings, laws, myths, bureaucracies, and family lines, killing a king no longer necessarily killed the system. Another king could replace him. That was the breakthrough. Human beings had transformed personal dominance into an institution that could survive the dominant person. The crown had become bigger than the head wearing it. The strange thing about kings is that the most important part was never the crown. It was the idea underneath it. Once humans learned to separate authority from the individual person holding it, political power could survive death. A ruler could die, be buried with astonishing ceremony, and still leave behind an office, a dynasty, a bureaucracy, a legal tradition, a tax system, and a son who had spent his entire childhood being told that this was all perfectly reasonable. That idea transformed civilization. Kingship helped organize armies, roads, temples, irrigation works, diplomacy, law, tribute, and long-distance administration. It also justified conquest, inequality, forced labor, and the concentration of enormous wealth. The same institution could build a city wall and make thousands of people build it. That contradiction never really disappeared. Modern states are obviously not ancient kingdoms. Most people today do not believe their tax office was appointed by a storm god. Probably, but we still live inside one of kingship's most powerful inventions, the belief that an institution can possess authority beyond the lifespan of any individual. Presidents leave, judges retire, CEOs resign, generals die, the office remains. The ancient world spent thousands of years turning personal dominance into something abstract, transferable, and legitimate. A throne was simply one early container for that idea, and perhaps that is why kings seem both ridiculous and strangely understandable. The jewelry is ridiculous. The giant chairs are ridiculous. Claiming your family was selected by heaven is at minimum ambitious marketing. But the human problem kingship tried to solve was real. How do thousands, then millions of strangers agree on who gets to make decisions? Our ancestors tried many answers. At some point, one of those answers became one person, one bloodline, one sacred office, and everyone else was supposed to kneel. So the next time you see a crown sitting behind museum glass, remember what you are actually looking at. Not the invention of one ambitious man, the invention of a story powerful enough to outlive him. Which brings us back to that original absurdity. Why did that guy get the palace, the army, the taxes, and the fancy chair? Because eventually humans stopped asking about the guy. They started believing in the chair.